I wanted to do a video about making the most of your bootcamp, UX bootcamp, UI bootcamp, early UX journey, mentoring, whatnot. I've mentored designers for a few years all over the world from different backgrounds, and there are certain things that stand out that I can tell if a student's gonna make it or not. I see right away. And it's not their previous experience, it's not their level of talent, it's not anything like that. The number one thing that I see is mindset. Mindset will determine if somebody's going to finish the boot camp or not. A lot of students do not finish a boot camp. In some cases, most students don't finish a boot camp, which is crazy to me because it's a lot of money, as my viewers probably know. It's a lot of money to do a boot camp. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of commitment. A lot of them don't offer guarantees or money back or anything like that. I do recommend a few books. Anything that has to do with the growth mindset, or Grit is another good book. I've recommended that before. So a few tips about your mindset going into a boot camp or just in your beginning journey. Number one is focus on attainable goals. So time and time again, the number one thing that I see from students is they come to me and they're really depressed because they went on Dribble. I'm talking to you. They went on Dribble and they found something amazing looking, and then they're like, oh my god, I can't make something this amazing and this is my competition. I'm never gonna get a job. So that's no good for anybody because Dribble has its own problems. Okay, so if I'm not going to talk about it too much, it's already been written about. Look up the Dribbleization of design. UX designers have case studies because you have to actually talk to a client and work through a problem. It's not just about making something pretty. It's way more than that. It's how it works, not how it looks, as Steve Jobs said. So go look up the Dribbleization of design. I'm not going to go into it. Don't just see something flashy online or Behance or Instagram or whatever and get depressed about it because you're comparing yourself. Don't do that. It hurts everybody. Just stop. Stop it. Stop doing it. Everyone starts out as a beginner. The person that you're seeing started out as a beginner. Everybody had to go through what you're going through. They're just at different parts in their journey. So the only difference between you and the person that you're seeing that work that you're coveting is time and practice, okay? And mentoring, whatever. But that's really the only difference. So just slow your roll. Slow your roll, you guys. I also have seen it the other way, where students kind of get sold this idea that they're going to fork over some cash to this boot camp, and then within 6 weeks or 6 months or some arbitrary amount of time, they're going to become a UX designer and they're going to make 6 figures. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I just don't think it works that way. I think it's a lifetime commitment to become a designer, and you keep learning more every day, all the time. It's not like a one-to-one thing, like you pay and you do a boot camp and then all of a sudden you're like a designer or something. So if you're lucky, maybe that happens for you. The other thing is, if you have transferable skills, like if you were a PM, if you were an engineer, if you were a graphic designers kind of have their own problems when and also marketing. There's some things that they focus on a lot that are sometimes not as helpful, but there are a lot of transferable skills if you have a background in one of those fields. So you have a higher chance because you've already done a lot of practice, so you kind of have a more solid foundation. So just remember that it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Set your mindset that it's a lifelong journey of learning and getting better and improving all the time. My next tip, number 2, is to begin with the end in mind and have a very compelling reason why you're doing this. So most of the people I mentored, they didn't get a job in graphic design or marketing. They couldn't find a job when they graduated at a 4-year university, and now they're trying to break into UX. That's okay, I understand. You need to be more than just dissatisfied with your job search. You really need to have a passion for it and love it. I talk about how following your passion is kind of not great advice, but you should have a very strong, concrete list of reasons for why you really need to finish your boot camp and become a UX designer. Not want to, but really need to. Because if you don't have that drive, you can't buy it, you can't get it anywhere else. You really need to have that drive deep within you for you to finish and for you to persist and not give up. Because if you don't have that drive, a lot of people either don't finish their boot camp, or they finish their boot camp and then when they go to do the job searching, they get disheartened with all the rejection, understandably, and they give up. So go research companies that you want to work for, or figure out if you want to work for. Understand the product. Understand what their culture, their design culture is like. What is the product space like? What is the product space in the future like? What are those problems that they're going to have to face 5, 10 years down the road? Who are the designers that work for that company? Where did they go to school? What did they do before this? Where did they work before this? What do their portfolios look like? And think to yourself, would this company, if you find a dream company, think like, would this company hire me based on my portfolio and my work? And the reason why I say that is because students often, when they start out, they're just trying to figure things out. So they do a lot of like passion projects, which is cool, but at the same time, it may or may not fit in with where they want to go in their career. So if you have a choice of a bunch of different projects, you want to think like, okay, well, if my goal is to work at a company that values this, like, how can I incorporate that into the work that I'm doing in this boot camp? I think that doesn't get talked about enough, like really enough. So tip number 3 is be like a sponge and soak up feedback. So when you're really early in your career, the number one thing that you should be getting good at is listening and knowing what to do with feedback, which is hard. I mean, even as a senior designer, sometimes it's hard to know what to do with feedback because you have to interpret it and then apply it to your work. So sometimes you will legitimately get bad advice and bad feedback, but I wouldn't focus on that. I wouldn't worry about that too much in this stage of the game because I think 99% of the advice you get is probably good advice. And when you get further on your career, you're going to get better at knowing what feedback serves you and what feedback you can kind of let go of and doesn't serve you. Sometimes it's about them or whatever. But what do I mean when I say feedback? So let's take a breath and I'm going to drop this truth bomb on you. Do you know why your student work looks like student work? It's because it is. It is. It is student work. It looks like student work because it is student work. When I look back at what I started out making, I'm pretty embarrassed and I think it's cringy because that's the natural process of things. You have to make something ugly before you make something beautiful, okay? That's how it works. We don't just come out the womb like Michelangelo or something. There's like a whole process involved. So how did those masters like Michelangelo get better? It's because they had feedback when they practiced. They copied the masters. They did still lifes. That's why you see so many, like if you go to an art museum, you see all these bowls of fruit. It's not because people loved painting fruit. It's not because they were like, I want this big painting of fruit because I love looking at paintings of fruit. That's not what happened. What happened is they needed to put in work. They needed to do the practice and they needed a subject that wouldn't move. So there's just still lifes, a million still lifes of bowls of fruit that are really realistic. That's what happened. So that's what you need to do in your career. the sad reality is that a lot of students, they come into design with fresh eyes, right? So that's great. And they kind of have that beginner's mind. And the issue is that they start designing things that are very novel, that never existed before. I see I did this, I'm guilty, I did this. I was like, this is cool, I've never seen it before, I'm gonna design it like this. Okay, when you do that, there is usually, oftentimes, a really good reason why it's not done that way. Sometimes not, but most of the time there is. So I see this a lot with navigation. Students like to come up with really novel, complicated, interesting ways to do navigation, and they don't realize that when you break a convention, you break a pattern, you really run the risk of alienating your users. So don't fall in love with your ideas, especially your first one. I see students kind of fall in love with these ideas and they don't hear valid criticism for it. So be open-minded, get feedback, learn the rules before you break them, try to be reasonable. So the third tip that I have is leverage your team. So when you pay for a boot camp, the number one thing, the missing secret ingredient that you are paying for is your mentor, time with your mentor. And if you do not have a good relationship with your mentor, request a new one. For the love of God, find one that you love and that you connect with. That's like really, really critical in my opinion. Booking calls with me outside of a boot camp is pricey, so leverage your boot camp. Like if you get a mentor with your boot camp, if you have unlimited calls, book those calls. Like really book those calls. Don't skip calls. Like if you have 10 calls, use all 10 of those calls or whatever it is. Make the most of it. Write down all your questions, anything that you can't Google, things you're just not certain on, write them down, show up on time to your call, use the entirety of your call. So yeah, those are I have more practical tips, but they're a little bit more granular in nature, so I'll be saving those for another video, and I hope that this was helpful for anybody watching, and if you're one of my students, then hello. And leave any comments or questions you have below, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time. Bye!